I inherited my grandfather's fishing license after he died. I just found out it wasn't for catching fish. In my 32 years, I've never been much of a fisherman, but when Grandpa Eddie died last month, he left me his boat and his commercial lobster license. Those things are worth more than most people's houses around here. I wasn't planning to use it. I've been working IT in Boston for 8 years, hadn't touched a fishing rod since high school, but something about losing the last family member who really knew me made me want to come back to Millfield Harbor. The boat was in decent shape for being 20 years old. I spent the first week cleaning it, organizing Grandpa's gear, trying to figure out if I could actually make a living pulling lobster traps. That's when I found the second license. I was going through his tackle box when I noticed a hidden compartment at the bottom. Inside was a manila envelope that felt ancient. The license inside looked nothing like the official laminated one hanging in the wheelhouse. This one was handwritten on thick, yellowed paper. At the top it said, Special Maritime Authority, Class D, in faded blue ink. Below that was a strange symbol that looked like tentacles wrapped around an anchor, and at the bottom, in Grandpa's familiar scrawl, active since 1987, feed monthly or face consequences. I thought it was some kind of joke until I showed it to Captain Briggs, a guy who's been fishing these waters for 40 years. When he saw it, his face went white. Where the hell did you get this? He whispered. My grandfather's boat. What is it? Briggs pulled me into a corner booth at Murphy's Tavern and ordered 2 whiskeys, even though it was barely noon. That's not a fishing license, kid. That's a feeding license. He explained that back in the 1980s, something had started hunting fishing boats off the coast. Not sharks or whales, something else. Something that would drag entire vessels down into the depths, leaving no trace except oil slicks and debris. The Coast Guard couldn't figure it out. Boats just kept disappearing. That's when a few of the older fishermen made a deal. They'd feed it. 1 boat a month would go out to the deep water with bait, and they'd keep the thing satisfied so it wouldn't hunt the rest of the fleet. Your grandfather volunteered first, Briggs said. Been doing it for 36 years. I stared at the license. What exactly was he feeding it? Pigs mostly, sometimes cattle. Whatever was cheap and heavy enough to sink fast. And if he stopped, then it would start hunting again. I looked at the date on the license. Grandpa's last feeding was 3 weeks ago, right before he had his heart attack. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about boats disappearing, about my grandfather going out alone every month for 36 years, carrying livestock to feed some kind of monster. I decided I had to see for myself. I loaded the boat with 50 pounds of frozen mackerel and headed out to the coordinates written on the back of the license. It was a spot about 12 miles offshore where the continental shelf drops into an underwater canyon that's over 800 feet deep. The water was dead calm. No seabirds, no dolphins. Even the usual sounds of the ocean seemed muted. I cut the engine and started dumping the mackerel overboard, wondering if I was losing my mind. That's when my depth finder started going crazy. Something huge was rising from the bottom. The screen showed a mass the size of a school bus moving straight up toward the surface, fast. The water around my boat started to churn and bubble. Then I saw a tentacle, dozens of them, each one thick as a telephone pole, breaking the surface around my boat. They were covered in what looked like barnacles, but when I looked closer, I realized they weren't barnacles. They were eyes. Hundreds of tiny black eyes covering every inch of the tentacles. The thing's head emerged next. It was like looking at a giant squid, but wrong. Too many eyes, arranged in spirals across its skull. Rows of teeth that spiraled down into its throat like a living garbage disposal. It was staring at me. All those eyes focused on me with an intelligence that made my skin crawl. I dumped the rest of the mackerel into the water as fast as I could. The creature's tentacles snatched up the fish instantly, stuffing them into its mouth with a wet crunching sound. But it wasn't enough. It was still staring at me, those tentacles reaching closer to my boat. That's when I understood. Grandpa hadn't been feeding it fish. He'd been feeding it livestock, big, heavy animals with lots of meat and fat. I was about to become the next meal. One of the tentacles wrapped around my boat's stern and started pulling. The deck tilted sharply, and I slid toward the water. I grabbed a flare gun from the emergency kit and fired it directly into the cluster of eyes on the creature's head. The thing let out a sound like metal scraping against metal and released my boat, but it didn't retreat. It circled me, those tentacles slapping the water like it was deciding whether to finish me off. I started the engine and gunned it toward shore, expecting to feel tentacles wrap around the boat any second, but the thing just watched me go, sinking back into the depths with that horrible grinding sound. When I got back to the harbor, Briggs was waiting at the dock. You went out there, didn't you? He said. I nodded, still shaking. Did you feed it enough? I don't think so, he sighed. Then you better get yourself a cow, and you better do it fast. I wanted to run, pack up, sell the boat, go back to Boston and pretend none of this ever happened. But then I thought about all the fishing boats that go out from this harbor every day, all the families who depend on the ocean for their living, all the people who have no idea what's waiting for them in the deep water. I bought 3 pigs from a farm inland and loaded them onto the boat the next morning. This time, when I dumped them into the water at the coordinates, the creature took them and disappeared without trying to kill me. I've been doing it for 2 months now. Once a month, I take livestock out to the deep water and feed the thing that lives in the canyon. Someone has to feed it, and if I don't, it will start hunting again. The worst part is what I found in Grandpa's logbook last week. There are coordinates for 3 other feeding spots along the coast. I'm not the only one with a Class D license, and I'm starting to think the thing I've been feeding isn't the biggest one down there.